Before we integrate any of the themes that I've set up with our applications, I want to go ahead and give you a quick crash course on CSS. We're going to look at the very basics of CSS and how it works. Now, this course is by no means a CSS course. There are a lot of other great courses on Udemy and other platforms that dive deep into all of the features of CSS. The goal of this video is to give you a high-level overview of how exactly it works, so the integration of the theme makes a bit more sense and doesn't seem like magic. We're going to kick things off by cracking open that Hangman directory and adding some new stuff into the mix. The first thing we're going to add is a new file, a CSS file, and that's where we're going to define all of these styles that style our application. For example, changing the color of this text to red, or changing the background of the browser from white to gray. All of that would be done with a style sheet. So we're going to go ahead and create a new folder inside of Hangman, and I'm going to call this one scripts. And in here, I'm actually going to move all of our scripts that we have so far. So I'm going to take app.js and move it in there. I'm also going to do the same thing for the Hangman script, and finally for requests. Now, the reason that I'm creating the scripts directory and putting all of our scripts inside of it is to clean up the file structure for our Hangman application. We're about to create a new file type, CSS, and I don't want everything sitting in one folder. Instead, we're going to organize things a little bit. Now, currently, our application is broken because the scripts we're trying to load are not found where we had previously set them up to be found. If we change where a script is located, we also have to change the source attribute path. In this case, before each one, we're just going to add /scripts/, so this would correctly get the requests file, and I will take this and I will paste it before the other two files as well. Now we're going to be back in a position where the application works, and from here, we're going to add a new directory. This one is going to be called styles, and this is where we are going to define our CSS file for styling the app. In here, let's go ahead and set that up. We can call it styles.css, and we're going to kick things off by creating a dummy style that's not necessarily going to look good, but it's going to make it very easy to notice when we've successfully linked our style, because we're just going to turn all of the text red. Let's go ahead and just write the code out first, and we'll expand on exactly what it does and its syntax in a little bit. We're going to use the asterisk sign followed by a space. Then I'm going to open and close a set of curly braces. And in here, we're going to set up the following: color, :space, red, semicolon, and that is it. Now, at this point, we don't know what the syntax does, and that's okay. The goal is to just get all of the text to show up as red. If we save the file in its current state, clearly the text is not red, and this is because we've created the styles file, but we haven't linked it to the HTML file. This would be like creating a script file in our folder, but never adding the script tag. In the case of a script, the script wouldn't run. In the case of our styles file, the styles are never going to be applied. So we're going to go ahead and fix that by linking the styles sheet in. We can load in the styles sheet up above by adding something into the head of our document. In here, what we're going to do is use the link tag. The link tag allows us to link an external resource, such as a style sheet, and there are a couple of attributes we need to set up to specify exactly that it is a style sheet and where it lives. To specify where the style sheet lives, we use the href attribute. So you can think of href as source for the script tag. In here, we put the path to that file from our web server. In this case, the web server starts at the Hangman directory. So we use /styles to go into the styles folder, then / the file name, styles.css. The other attribute we're going to set up after href is called rel, which is short for relationship. And in this case, we're just defining that the thing we're linking is of a certain type. And in this case, the relationship we're going to use here is style sheet. Now, with this one line in place, we can save index.html, and this time around, we can see in the browser that everything we've set up is red. Clearly not the final styles we want, but the point we're trying to make here is that we can indeed link an external style sheet in. These styles are being applied because of the link tag here. Now let's go ahead and explore exactly how we can customize the styles to maybe be something a little closer to what we actually want. Over in styles.css, we're going to break down the code that we have so far. So what we have here is a style rule. It is a rule that describes how we want to style our document, and there are a few different pieces to this rule. The first is the selector, which is what we have right here before the curly braces. The selector allows us to select the various elements from the page that we want to target. The selector is very similar to the selectors that we've used with document.querySelector and querySelectorAll. We'll explore the other ways we can select documents in just a few minutes. For now, we're using the universal selector, which selects everything on the page. That's why we're seeing a red paragraph up above and a red button down below. So that is the selector part of the rule. Inside of the curly braces, this is where we add our various style declarations. Here we have a single style declaration. We have our property on the left-hand side, and we have our property value on the right-hand side. Now there are various properties that CSS supports. One of them is color, which allows you to set the text color for the targeted element. In this case, we are targeting everything, and we are also setting the color to red, explaining why this shows up over here. Now we can go ahead and customize the selector to see how we might make better use of the styles file. When we first explored selectors with querySelector and querySelectorAll, we found out that we could select by tag name, we could select by ID, we could select by class, or a combination of the three. So right here, we could go ahead and select all paragraph elements in the document by just using P. So now the rules have stayed the same down below. It is just the selector that has changed. If we go ahead and save the CSS file in its current state, we can see that the two paragraphs are still indeed red, which is correct. Down below, our button is not red because we haven't targeted it with any specific styles. From here, we could customize the styles for our paragraphs, or we could style other things by setting up other rules. Down below, let's go ahead and target that button with its own set of styles. Right here, I am going to target the button by its tag name. I'm going to use the curly braces to create the place where I set up my rule declarations. And in here, we are also going to set color. This time, though, we're going to set it to white. Now, we're going to set up a second property as well, so you can see what that might look like. Another declaration down below. This time, we're going to set the background for our button, so the background color, using the background property. I'm going to set background equal to a color. Let's go ahead and use red once again. So this time we are applying different styles to the button and to the paragraph, and down below, not down below, on the left, we can see that these styles are indeed showing up as expected. Our paragraphs still show up in red. Our button has a red background with white text. Now let's go ahead and explore how we can select by things other than the tag name. The tag name selector isn't particularly useful. It's going to make up a small portion of our styles rules, but a lot of the styles rules are going to be targeting by a class, some by ID, so let's start with ID. What we're going to do is target the first paragraph by its ID. I want to apply some special rules to the puzzle, for example, so I need to target by the puzzle ID. Just like we saw with querySelector and querySelectorAll, we start off with the pound sign or the hashtag followed by the ID, in this case, puzzle. Now I have a style rule that targets a specific element on the page, setting its color to red. If I save the file, we can see that is exactly what happens over here. The first paragraph shows up in red, that is being targeted. The second one, which does not have an ID of puzzle, is not shown in red because it no longer matches this rule, this selector, which means that these styles are no longer applied. And now let's go ahead and target by class name. Currently, we have no classes inside of our markup, so we need to go ahead and address this. I'm going to add a class for this paragraph right here and for the button down below. So right after the ID attribute for the paragraph, I'll set up class, setting it equal to. Right here, we can add a space-separated list of classes. I'm going to add warning. If I wanted another one, I could add that after a space, second class, for example. That was to just demonstrate the syntax. We're just going to have one class for this one. Now down below, for the button, we can add the same class to the button as well. Class equals warning. Now that both of them have the same class, let's go ahead and save the markup and change one of our rules to actually target by the class. We're going to change this second rule, changing its selector from selecting by tag name button to selecting by class by using the dot. Dot followed by the class name warning, just like this. Now we're going to have these various style declarations applied to all elements with the class of warning. If I save the styles file, we can see that is exactly what happens. Right here for the paragraph, we have a red background with white text, and we have the exact same thing down below for the button. So now we have a single style rule that allows us to style multiple things on the page by targeting by class name. One of the last things I want to cover is how we can set up a rule to have multiple selectors. Down below for the second rule, I'm going to comment this one out using the command / or control / keyboard shortcut on Windows. And up above, we're going to alter this rule by changing its selector. Instead of selecting things just using the ID of puzzle, we're going to add another separate selector into the mix. We do this by creating a comma-separated list of selectors. So we have our first one, then we have a comma space, and we add in our second one. For the second one, I could select all buttons, for example. Now, it's important to note that what we have here is not conditional logic using and, it is conditional logic using or. So we're going to give the color red to any element who has an ID of puzzle or any element who is a button. If I wanted to select by both, I would have to put button in front of our ID selector. This is the syntax that we explored previously when talking about query selector and query selector all. In our case, we want the following. So now we're going to apply that color red to both of these selectors, and if we save the file, we can see that's what we get. The first paragraph is showing up in red because it has an ID of puzzle. Even though it's not a button, that does not matter. The second paragraph is not showing up in red because it does not have the ID of puzzle. It also is not a button. It meets neither of these criteria. Down below, the button is showing up in red. While it might not have the ID of puzzle, it does match one of the other selectors, in this case, the selector for button. So all of the style declarations down below for this rule are indeed going to be applied. All right, that's where I'd like to stop for this one. In this video, we took a look at the basics of CSS. We figured out how we can link a file into our website, and we also looked at how we can work with style rules. We learned that a rule is made up of a set of selectors as well as a set of style declarations. Now, if we were going to continue styling this application, we would just add more rules with different and unique style declarations. The same core constructs make up all styled websites on the internet. It is just the set of selectors and rules that allow you to really customize things. There are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, well, definitely hundreds, of different style properties you can customize. So if you are interested in learning more about CSS, I recommend taking a complete course dedicated to it. There are a lot of great features and rules available to you to allow you to customize the look, layout, and functionality of your website. Now that we've gotten the very basics of CSS down and we understand what's happening here, we're going to go ahead and integrate the themes that I've set up, allowing us to have a more styled version of all three applications. We're going to continue with the Hangman application in the next one. So let's go ahead and jump right into that.